Hi and welcome back to the Real You project. I'm glad you've joined us on the talk 2. This is a series of 4 talks, so if you've missed the first one, then it's dead easy. Just jump back onto YouTube and you'll find some videos there. There's also some resource videos as well. One on meditation, which is what we talked about the last time, a great interview with the lovely Anna. So yeah, just jump back on that. I don't know, some of you have been struggling to get a workbook and any information that you want. Again, just go onto the Real You page. There's an email for myself. Just email me if you need anything at all, any resource wise. When I'm talking about the workbooks, we try and put out links there for you. We're new at this, so bear with us. We're trying to do so many things behind the scenes so that most things that you get from us are pretty automated so that you don't have to download and print and things like that. So please bear with us. This is just going to kind of develop over time. So although I feel under pressure to sort of rush this through, I think it's just the amount of information that I'm trying to get over to you is hard to do it in a quick fashion. So bear with us. And like I say, if you've got any questions, just literally just get in touch. If you've got any feedback where you're enjoying what we're doing or you're struggling or you're not understanding anything, then just get in touch. It really is simple. The email's there. I'm quick to reply to anything. So yeah, just go for it, guys. This session 2, is realistically is where the battle of life actually totally sits. I've called it the battle of the mind because literally this is where, like I say, you know, if you sort of see people that are successful or unsuccessful, whatever the connotation you have about success, please don't, let's go there for now. Let's leave that to the end of the sessions. But whatever you think is determining success, then everything that when you see somebody that's doing life well, it's usually because the mind is in some form of control. When we're not doing life well, it's when the mind is really plaguing us. It's really keeping us stuck. It's quite often at times it's actually destroying our life. It's destroying movement forward. It keeps us stuck. It's all sorts of stuff happening. So this session is absolutely paramount to how to go forward. Session 1 was to set some grounding on this because I believe that if you can't empty your mind first of all, and if you can't accept that you've got sort of like 2 minds, again we're going to cover this in much more detail this time. But session 1 is about sort of just making sure that you've got good grounding. It's all about preparation. I'm watching my wife Laura do sort of gardening at the moment, and we're just talking a lot about just how to prepare good ground. And when you do that, you start to, from very little seed, you'll see something grow. So don't rush into this. Take your time, think about it. I would say download the workbooks, but also if you just want a pen and paper, make sure you just write key words, that's something that if anything speaks to you at all, just write that down. Think about it for a little bit. Why did you write that word down? And hopefully over time we'll get to sort of cover all of that. Okay, I hope that's just a sort of a good intro to how we're doing this. Please, if you would like the videos on YouTube and if you would subscribe, that'd be cool. We're trying to do something local. We're trying to build a community of people in this area that just love on other people. I've been part of all sorts of different things, and one of the things that where people go out and do great things is where we struggle is that we're not actually sorted ourselves in our own self. I don't know if you've ever heard anybody actually say things like, you know, how are you in yourself? We've just got to understand that there's this battle of our mind, and this is what we're going to be, like I say, we're going to be talking to today. So one of the things I want to ask you first off is, on talk 1, did anything resonate with you? And also, did you do anything? So have you meditated yet? Have you done some mindfulness? Have you done some sort of defragging of any way? Have you done some journaling? Have you got yourself a planner so that you can start to do a to-do list and you can start to see what gains that you're making? Don't forget about the 1% increments. Have you taken a cold shower? I know one of the guys that are listening to this is starting to do that, and what that's about is just literally, enjoy your shower on your normal sort of levels, but then towards the end of it, just start turning it colder. It gets you invigorated, it gets you ready for the day. It's a really, really good idea and a good tip. If you want to know more about that, there's a guy called Wim Hof. Again, I'll send some links onto this, or share them even. And Wim Hof just talks about sort of like the goodness of sort of like doing things in the cold. So I don't know if you've checked out some of the resources that we put on the workbook last time. Again, they're pretty much on the Facebook page and things like that. So all I wanted to know was if you wanted to do any of those things like meditation, did you want to start sort of writing things down in a planner? Did you want to buy a planner in the first place? Have you? If you said yes to any of those questions, that you wanted to do them, but if I said to you, have you done them, and you say no, then you need to sort of work out why you haven't actually gone forward in doing any of those things. And that's literally because you're having a battle with the mind. I know first off you'll probably say, I just haven't got time to do this, that and the other. I don't believe for 1 second that we haven't got time just to sort of do a journal at the end of the day. I don't believe that we haven't got time to wake up in the morning and to be grateful. Have you practiced gratitude? If you haven't done meditation and you haven't done a journal, if you haven't done all the other things that I'm suggesting, then, you could just literally wake up in the morning and just search for some things that you're grateful for. Mindfulness, you can do it while, I've said, brushing your teeth. So that's not taking any more time. I mean, I've just driven into this place this morning down the promenade from Old Colwyn, and, the weather has been so amazing at the moment, and I'm driving past and I'm looking at, well, there's just hardly any clouds, but what clouds there are, the formation of those is just amazing. It's just, beauty in itself. I got to the traffic lights that I don't know if some of you are experiencing in Rows-on-Sea, but, you get a chance to sit at the traffic lights and look at the sea. And so, in that moment, you can either do some breathing exercises at the traffic lights, or you could just find things to be grateful for. So time, don't let it be the robber of you. It's not time that's the problem. It's the mind that's the problem. Okay, so we're going to really sort of like dig into that today, and I want to start off with just asking you, what is stopping you do what you want to do. And so we're going to push on, and we're going to start talking about this battle in the mind and what is that all about. So I'm going to sort of do this session and if you look in your workbook, you'll find that most of this session will have what we've called the three little morphs. I don't know if you remember that from way back, but there's two megaphones pointing at essentially you, and you've got this sort of other voices. It's who are you listening to and who are you talking to. When we say who are you talking to, it's not sort of like, when you're talking out loud sometimes and muttering to yourself. This is literally, you'll be so many times of the day, you will be having conversations with yourself, and you need to know who that self is, and you need to know why you make the decisions that you make after talking to yourself. And so this is what we're going to be talking about. This session is massive, guys. I'm probably going to keep repeating that because I just know that this is the way of getting unstuck. This is the way of taking back control of your life. We tend to project all of our sort of like seemingly failures, let's say, the things that happen to us. We tend to sort of think of all those as an external. And this happened to me because of, and I can't do this because of. But honestly, the biggest battle that you got is not external, it's internal. So we're going to sort of talk about how to unlock your potential. and why in the past you would have failed at certain things. So, like going on a diet, or deciding to read a little bit more, or journaling, or anything else. The reason why you would have failed is because of your inner voice, the other you. So if relationships have been sort of like poor in the past, it's probably because of your self-talk. All of those things. So I mentioned in the last talk that I used to go onto courses and couldn't understand why. When I got back from the courses, that a lot of things I would be really up for it. I'd be like, yeah, let's do this. And then a week later, I was back to the normal self. Huge amounts of that is habits, which we're going to talk about sort of later. But a lot of it was just sort of like, I would settle into my old self. And I wasn't ready, and I hadn't prepared the ground, and I wasn't ready to change because I didn't know that I had this narrative in my head of my belief system that was directing everything that I do. It's the one that's built up my habits. It's why I decide to, let's say, even support Liverpool or vote a certain way, or all those things come from a bias of a belief system that you're talking to all the time. And I knew I was probably biased towards certain things, but I didn't know I was chatting to myself, and I didn't know if it was making the decisions for me. So I just wish that I'd known this sort of 30 years ago, because I'd really believe that life for me would have been a lot more sort of simple. I've said very often now that, my life, I'm just not the same person I was sort of 7 years ago. And I know that people around me on a daily basis might not have seen all of the changes, but most of the changes that have been going on are, like I say, they're internal. So some of it doesn't show externally. It also, I know that sort of a lot of people around you won't like change. So your environment over this next sort of few weeks, months, whatever, however long you sort of stay with this, is that your environment is incredibly important. So your friends, family, work colleagues, I don't know why this is particularly a problem, but most people don't like change. I think changing you or changing other people, I don't know if they feel a little bit threatened by that. I don't know if it's because maybe sometimes that we want to change and don't, and then somebody else does, and we're a little bit jealous about that. It's a difficult one, and it's a complicated one, but it's not something I want you to worry about right now, because again, it's just going to close us down and get us stuck. But if you're finding change around you, or when you are doing something different and you're finding resistance to that, then you've got to really check out your environment. Are you in the right relationships? Are you standing up for yourself? Are you in the right job? So we'll go through all these things, but sort of check your environment, because if you're really struggling, that can be one of the areas where you're just not getting any headway. So we're going to be sort of focusing on how to sort of get out of stuck. There's things like changing relationships, your ambitions, dreams, how to be sort of get more content and happiness. We will touch on trauma and forgiveness and unforgiveness, but all this is about sort of like how to master yourself to be yourself. So I'm pretty excited about your journey for you. I want you to become the victor and not be the victim of situations, and that can be big things and small things, just on a daily basis. Are we victorious in the day, or have we been a victim to even distraction? Because that's probably my biggest sort of problem is I do get distracted. Don't forget that sort of everything in life is about choices. We need to make some good choices. I know that people will say things like, well, this has happened to me and blah, blah, blah. But, we've also, when those things do happen to us, we then got some choices to, and how we move on and how we sort of go forward. So don't forget, this is a journey. It's not a destination. That's why we've called it a project. It's not an overnight sort of thing. If you feel that you're not getting anywhere, that's probably because we're all so used to instant everything, instant bloody coffee, instant everything. So let's just start thinking about how to this is, this is your life. We're going to try and put a life plan together for you. So start thinking sort of like just those baby set steps, those small things, and just find out and think about what it is that's stopping you. So in your workbook, we've got a series of questions, and I think from memory, I'll just sort of check because I've got one open here. We've got 25 questions. I've been doing a few of these behind the scenes because I just wanted to kind of know how the questions are being taken and how they're being received. And the questions are, like I said, there's 25, but the answers are where you can circling things like often, sometimes, rarely, never. Now, there's 25 questions. If you circled often 25 times, then we probably just need to swap places because your life is you're sorted. You're done. Get in touch. You're obviously, like I say, your life's in control. You probably should be a life coach or something like that. So if you do want to swap places with me, that's cool. Like I say, just get in touch. If you're not sure where to get this, like I say, it'll be in your workbook. I'm hoping by time we've done this that it'll be something that you'll be able to fill in. You won't have to print off. But then it'll be part of your life plan. There'll be things in there that we'll discuss sort of further on, but you can start to use it as a bit of a wake up. One of the guys that I've been speaking to basically called it sort of like a kick up the arse, really. So there you go. So we're going to be talking first off about the essential self and your social self. So answer those questions. If you need to sort of stop and pause the video right now, because I've already sort of been a lengthy intro to this, so stop, pause, maybe get a coffee, but go and answer the questions. And then once you've answered the questions, then come back, pick this back up, and we'll start sort of like working through sort of what it is that the answers to these are. So got the 25 questions, and so what I would say is, like I say, if you've answered often 25 times, then cool. If you've answered often and sometimes more than the other questions, then you'll probably just need some slight sort of tweaks, which again, this course will just probably outline those. They'll be like, oh yeah, that was pretty obvious. I now need to refocus. I know where I'm going. I'm more aware. I'm doing my mindfulness. I'm journaling. These small tweaks will really get you back on track. While I say back on track as well, is like just so that I don't forget further on, is that I'm looking to try and get you more in line with your true self and where you're going. And when you get your values in line and you get your life purpose in line and you find of all the different things that you need to get in line with, that's where you'll find your flow and your joy. So that's what we're trying to do, is that life's probably a bit of a mishmash. It's probably quite a big, daunting sort of thing. So I'm trying to bring this down and then get you sort of more centered into where you're intentionally sort of like wanting to go and who you want to be. So if you've answered sort of sometimes, sort of often and sometimes, then your few tweaks. If it's going to be sometimes and rarely, then obviously there's a tiny bit more work to do. And if it's rarely, never, then possibly what I would say here right now is that you might be on the edge of, say, depression, or you might be depressed. I would seriously consider getting some counselling and doing courses like CBT. They're really sort of good places to start. I can help you with things like sort of trauma and stuff like that, but it's going to be much more of a one-to-one. And it's basically, I would say, it's a longer walk that we need to do. It's not going to be an instant fix. What we want to be doing is trying to get your nevers into rarelies and rarelies into sometimes and sometimes into oftens. And out of those 25 questions, you can quite quickly identify in where it's a never and rarely. It's where there's probably some issues of where we need to reform our thinking and literally question why we're actually putting, never and rarely, and so we can swap that into obviously being more often, well, sometimes and often. So what I want to ask you there is how did it feel? How did you feel when you answered often, and how did it feel when you answered sometimes? And obviously, how did it feel when you put never and rarely? Again, sort of one of the feedbacks that I had was that when it was rarely and never, it was a sign of a, let's just give myself a kick up the backside, and this is where I know I need to work on. The oftens is probably where you've actually finding your joy, and you're obviously comfortable with yourself. But what I want to sort of go into sort of next is that for us to know why we answer those questions, I want you to think for a second and just think back to why and who did you talk to be able to answer the questions. Because some of the times you'd have just gone, oh yeah, it's often, sometimes, oh that's never. But then there'll be some of the times where you're like, oh, I'm not sure about that one. And then you kind of came to a decision. And even when you quickly said rarely or never, you're kind of like, well, why did you put that? And how do you know that that perspective of that answer to that question is true? This is where we need to look at this section, which is called social self and essential self. Your social self is your construct. That's the social part of you that you think, well, I'd like to do this, but well, maybe I shouldn't. And then that self-talk is like, well, maybe I'm just not good enough. I'm not worthy. And again, we're going to talk more on belief systems and where they've come from. But your social self is where you're socially been made to adapt into that person by other things around you. So I take things to an extreme, but you might sort of like want to run around sort of like naked, which is fine in your own home, but obviously socially, you don't want to be running down the street like that. So there's good social constraints, but there's also social constraints that literally are formed just by the people that we spend time with, our tribes and things like that. So sometimes if you're with a more relaxed tribe in a certain area, anything goes, and then with some other people, it's like, ooh, you better not do that. So you can see where social influences are on you. So there's a definite side of social self and essential self. I would say also in your social self is kind of like, I would also call it your soul. Your soul gets influenced by things by your belief system. It's kind of like it's being made. And I'm not sure, sort of like, well, I just think it's in the social self and your soul is where the battles are mainly sort of being taken place. So we'll talk about the social self in sort of more sort of detail as we go through. But I want you to just sort of write down in those sort of questions. You've got some bits in your workbook where you're following through, where you've answered sort of the rareties and nevers and what made you make those decisions. So I want you to sort of just write down that social self is just think about the things that you would like to do, but you feel that you can't. And then try to understand what it is and why you've decided that you can't. And just write down what is your social self. Your essential self is where I believe is where your spirit lies. Let's say I call this a bit like soul spirit. Maybe that's a bit kind of like too spiritual, let's say, with soul and spirit. But essential self, social self, whichever sort of way you want to look at it. Some people call it sort of like, system thinking 1 and 2, and there's all sorts of different bits of jargon. So whichever works for you that makes you wake up and know that you're actually being formed by these other decisions. Now, I'm going to be doing a video with my wife Lara because she really gets this essential self. She's been what would you call it? When you're just I can't think of the word right now, but when you're sort of constrained into a sort of way of thinking, that's been her life pretty much. And then when she started to understand the essential self, it was a really good way of her knowing that she could be herself, and it was really interesting to see her enjoy being herself. So your essential self is your essence. It's I believe it's something you're more born with. It's like where your gift sits, and if you find what you're gifted at, it's fine. It's easier to be in a happier place. It's where you find the most sort of joy. We talked about sort of flow before. I think if you're doing something you're gifted at, it usually sort of comes reasonably easy. Like we said before, you do still need to practice, but I would still say, yes, practice does make perfect, but practice, 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 meditation, practice, mindfulness, practice all those things. And then you'll start to understand sort of where your essential self lives. It's absolutely, I find it beautiful to see people be their essential selves. People that are just really comfortable. Yeah, it's just great. It's where I think sort of like I say, if you're out and about and you see somebody just in their place, you can see it, can't you, when they just feel content, and you can see sort of that sort of side of it. So I'm going to do the interview with Lara about sort of social self and essential self, so mainly about that essential self. So click on that sort of afterwards. It'll be a sort of a 15-20 minute sort of interview, but I do think it will help you massively to understand where your social self and essential sort of self is. So what we're going to cover next is I think we need to sort of go into then your belief system. So sorry, just quickly on that, on your workbook, you've got a bit that says decision making. Like I say, the decisions that you'll be making will be from either your essential self or your social self. So you can start to sort of you start looking at why you're making the certain decisions that you're making, and then look back at those sort of questions. So limiting beliefs, you and your belief system. Your belief system is formed. The scientists and neurologists sort of like know this to be anything between sort of 0, 6, and 8. There's arguments about how far, but very few people will argue further than 8. So what do I mean by your belief system and it being formed? Your parents, your siblings, your teachers, your environment, even the places where you have grown up. So if you've grown up in let's say a posh neighbourhood, or a poor sort of background, or it's been in Wales or England, there's these things that start to become a bias for you, and they will make part of your belief system. Even if it's around as well as like things like sort of money. If you're born into, like say, a poor sort of background, then you'll probably start thinking poorly about sort of money. And so all these different things can have a huge impact on how you perceive, not how you know, how you perceive the world. So those belief systems are put on you between sort of like say 0 and 7, 8, and they're extremely difficult to undo, if especially they're negative. So if you've been consistently told that you're no good at something, then you will believe that intrinsically, and it'll be really, really hard to sort of get you to think in any other way. Now, again, we can help you do that, because first and foremost, to start thinking differently is that you need to start thinking about how the information is that you're taking in, and what has been given to you in the past. I was talking to Mark, who helps do these videos for me, and he was saying that the word information is literally formatting of the mind. So you're formatting the mind, And so you've got to understand that the mind is actually uh, plastic. Well, plastic is I can't say the other word, but you can change it. It can be changed, but it just takes a lot of work. So just notice plasticity. That's the word. So just sort of know that you can change it. It's just it is hard. You know that old saying, you can't talk change an old dog new tricks, teach them even. You can, and it's the same for you. But you just know that it's hard, and just know that you're battling with yourself and not externally, like I say. So, belief systems form between sort of 0, 7, and 8. It's siblings, you know. So if you're kind of having a sibling rivalry, it'll have a massive effect on you. So if you are struggling with certain things, then just delve back into thinking, you know, what was my relationship like with my brother, my sister? You know, I say kids, you know, kids in school, you know, at 2 and 3, flipping heck, you know, they're they're quite harsh, aren't they? You know, there's little boys that are running around sort of trying to thump everything, and yeah, just there's a lot going on that you just don't. And then teachers, you know, we look up to teachers and we think that everything that they say is gospel, but what we need to understand is that if this belief system is formed between 0 and 7, who gave it you? But then you've got to realise then, well, who gave them their belief system? You know, it could go back in generations, and you will know that there are stories out there. Until somebody decides to sort of draw a line in the sand, you know, we know that sort of families can pass on sort of like these things of, you know, like just speaking really badly to each other. There's no encouragement. You know, all that sort of in the past, it was stiff upper lip and don't cry, and you know, all these things have a massive effect on us, and your belief system could be handed down by like 3, 4, 5 generations because somebody decided that that's the way that we're going to do it, and they would have passed that down to you, and then you'd have had it passed down again and again, and you have to question, especially you know, you could be literally going back 100 years on why a belief a certain way of thinking is affecting your choices now. Well, 1920 will not be the same as 2020, but if you're operating with an old belief system, then no wonder you're going to struggle. So look back and think back on, you know, just question why you think like you do. Now, if you've had a traumatic upbringing and you've basically just, you know, you're in a very victimized sort of position, there's another sort of window of opportunity of changing your belief system. It happens around about between 18 and 22. And it's usually when we sort of, you know, go off into our own sort of ways and maybe further education, or when we're sort of like trialing new relationships. And what I would say there is that quite often we look for confirmation of bad thinking. And so we go into bad relationships where if you've been a victim, there are victimizers out there and they will search you out. They will literally, honestly, they will sniff you out. They will know that you have been a victim of certain things, and they will control you. And what you will say then is that your thinking of I'm a victim will be confirmed. You know, the fact, you know, if you think that you're not loved, you'll find people not to love you, sadly, and then that belief system will be confirmed and it'll be cemented, and you'll probably then carry that through the rest of your life. I know, and this is going to sound a little bit harsh, but this is why I do this, is that I see people in their later years in life looking very bitter, very sad, very angry, and that they're angry that life didn't pan out the way that they would hoped it would do. And I'm massively into knowing that the reason why that hasn't happened is that they have been dealing with a belief system that's unfunctional. It's not working for them. It's not serving them. And basically, I would say it's a persecution of the self. And that for me is just pure disaster. It's just where just bad life happens, and so in your belief system, if you found good things that serve you in your belief system, because not everything's going to be negative, find those positive things and find out where you are flourishing and where you're not flourishing, and then test those. We're going to do in talk 3 a what we call a SWOT analysis, so that's going to be very helpful in these things. So don't worry at the moment, don't panic, don't think, oh, I can't change. You can. We'll help you. There is very much, this is planned out, so step by step we can rebuild you. So stick with this, guys. Don't give up. If you saw a video I shared the other day about not giving up, I mean, that guy is just absolutely amazing. So I say, so that's going to be your battle. So your self-talk is that it again, scientists will say that you can talk out loud, let's say approximately 300 words per minute. I'm probably pushing that at the moment. I'm sorry about that. We're trying to get through this. But your self-talk is 10 times that. Well, it's basically, if you can talk to yourself out loud 300 words per minute, you're talking to yourself around about 1,300 words a minute. So at the end of the day, let's be honest. Who's going to win that battle? Your conscious sort of thinking of like your 300 words per minute, or your 1,300 words per minute. It's like, say, when I've been on courses, I'm listening to somebody, they're speaking to me at 300 words per minute, and yet I'm listening to myself at 1,300. So if I'm sort of saying, even though whoever is talking, I'm like, I could agree with that. But my self-talk is like, what a load of tosh this is. There's no way that's going to go into your new thinking. It's just not. So again, if you sort of say, right, I'm going to go to the gym today, tomorrow, whenever, and your self-talk is like talking to you 1,300 words per minute, saying, nah, you've tried that before, you failed, you're a failure. You're always going to be like this. This is how it is for you. And actually, I love sitting on the sofa watching EastEnders, eating crisps and chocolate, and your belief system that sits behind you is incredibly lazy. It's built that way so that it makes life a little bit easier. Like, you don't have to think about breathing. You don't actually have to think about an awful lot of things because you just do them by learned behavior. But there's a huge amount of that sort of self-talk that is absolutely the thing that's stopping you do anything that you really desire and wish to do. So just know who you're talking to and how quickly and how well that talks to you. And what we've got to do is we've got to reframe that self-talk. We've got to make those 1,300 words per minute. We've got to make them something that you want to hear. Something that's going to serve you. Something that's going to set you free. And the only way I believe in doing that is getting conscious and switching this conscious sort of mind over. We're going to do a session on conscious mind in a second, but I want you just to know that the reason why I ask you to meditate, the reason why I ask you to journal, the reason why I ask you to look for gratitude is that those are the things that are going to change that belief system. The brain doesn't like it any other way. It only likes it in 2 ways. A sharp shock, kick up the ass to make you move, or 1% increments, so looking for gratitude, journaling, and etc. So believe me, guys, this stuff works. I know it works because I've studied it. And so I don't forget on that is that the studying that I've done is to make things as simple as possible as I can do. Virtually everything I talk about, somebody's done degrees and written books on this stuff, and made it their life's work. I'm not going to make each session a life's work. What I'm trying to do is study as much as I can, make it simple, and so that we can help each other on this. The courses that I was talking about in each of these sessions could cost you £800 upwards. You only access them through, say, if you work for a bank or a big institution, you maybe the councils and NHS and things like that. So, but a lot of time that's for higher management. It's not for the ordinary person in the street, and it's the ordinary person in the street that I want to try and help, or we want to try and help as a company. So just understand that we need to rewrite that narrative. We've talked about narrative before. We want you to grab the pen so that you can be the author of your life, because I'm serious about this. Your self-talk has been written not by you. It's been written by social constraints. It's been written by people that that you're in your environment. So believe me that your self-narrative is not part of who you think you should be and why you are where you are. So I'm going to sort of stop there on sort of talking about sort of your self-talk, but in your workbook you've got sort of questions on there. It's like, what perspective are we taking these things from? That's formed your belief system. The world view has in your friends, etc. So have a little look on that. And then I want you to ask you some questions like, are you sure that what you've been told is true? Are you certain? And again, over this next sort of few sort of weeks and months, and if you're doing sort of one-to-ones with me, we will be able to sort of help with this, changing this narrative. But I want to, question, your perspective. Is it true? In your workbook there, you've also got something that says there, it's got, what are you fearful? And fear is a massive part of why we get stuck. And you've got an acronym there, and it's fear is false evidence appearing real. So you can just fill that in your workbook. And, most of the things that we're fearful is because we've been told to be fearful from it, or even it's just historical. We knew lots of fear is from your fight and flight and experience. And, if you've not been given much resilience in your sort of parenting and upbringing and things like that, you can be fearful of virtually sort of everything. I mean, again, we're in lockdown at the moment still, and I just see a massive amount of people that are absolutely stuck in fear of all of what's going on. And while I know that there is a virus out there, I'm actually not fearful of it, and there's many reasons why I'm not, and that's too deep to go into, and maybe some people will want to criticize that because of their thinking, but it's just that where my mindsets are, I control my mindset, and I don't want to be fearful because it will stop me doing the life that I want to do. So fear is false evidence appearing real, and you've got to question those things. And what I talk to people a lot about is that with fear itself is that it stops you often sort of doing something that you really should be doing, and it constrains you. You can be fearful of like, my background, like I say, is hairdressing. You can be fearful of taking that first haircut, can't you? That first snip. But once you build in practice and you reduce the level of fear, you start to get better at things, and you start to develop that sort of way. So don't certainly start looking at fear and sort of saying, well, actually, is it really going to have harm on me? If it is, fine. At the moment, fine. Literally, honestly, wear a mask, do whatever, stay indoors. I'm cool with that. But just understand why and why you're in that head frame. It's things like people have a fear of flying, and yet there's loads of stats on there that you'll get to the other side. Well, there's more chance of, let's say, of something happening to you by getting in and out of the car. So you're going to not go on a car journey. And it relates exactly the same to sort of like why you should and shouldn't get into a plane. So what you're fearful is massive, and you need to know, is it a false fear? But also sometimes those where you fear is like, on the other side of fear, what gets you on the other side of fear is courage. It's not a popular word, and yet now at the moment we're being courageous with the people working in the NHS. We're using that word quite a lot now. But on the other side of courage, I believe is life. When you get fearful, you get short breath and you start having to think about things and you get more conscious. And on the other side of that, if you're courageous with your thinking and your doing, it's often where your breath and you notice your breath. So on the other side of fear, I honestly believe is opportunity. I believe there's life on the other side of fear. So don't be locked down on what is fearful. In your workbook again, we've got some words that I know that some of you guys are talk to yourself, and it's like saying things like it's got two sessions. So stupid, worthless, pathetic, useless, horrible. Look at those and see if you identify with any of those. I would suggest right now that you'll be none of those things. Somebody will find you attractive, even if you say that you're ugly. Somebody, in situations where you think it's hopeless, somebody hopefully will come along and provide you help to give you hope. So look at those words, but then sort of see if there's anything that you identify with, and then let's see if we can sort of change that perspective on those. You'll also sort of find some positive words that you can start to replace. And what I would say on there is start to look at those positive words and start to meditate on some of those and find evidence where you have had joy in your life, where you have been happy, and find those places and spend some time on thinking of why and what happened and how did those happen. So you've got two sort of sets of words there that you can play around with, and you can start to see, am I sort of been socially constricted, or some of those things in there, or should I be doing essentially some of those things that really speak to me on those the sort of good points. Lastly, we're just going to sort of finish this talk up with you'll have a picture of an iceberg in there, and basically you've got sort of what's on the top of the water and you've got what's hovering underneath the water. And again, what's hovering above is what we can see. It's what we would call our conscious thinking. And what's underneath is our unconscious. Pretty much similar to our belief system that, like when we're talking about sort of like the percentage of words that we can say and what with our self-talk is, our subconscious is 80% minimum. A lot of studies will say 90%. It's between sort of 80 and 90%. It doesn't really matter if we're talking about sort of in the slight percentages, because at the end of the day, it's way bigger than the conscious. So the unconscious or subconscious is way bigger than the conscious. And it's the unconscious, the self-talk, the narrative that's actually the driver in everything that you do. So it's where your belief system sits, it's where your emotions are, it's where your habits are. We'll talk about habits. We've got a habit tracker that we'll be able to put onto one stage of the workbook. It's where our fight and flight is, so our protective reactions. I mean, they're really good because they sit in our unconscious, but if a car comes around a corner, you'll jump out of that way without even thinking about it. You'll do it unconsciously. So the fight and flight sits in it does some very good things for us, but it also stops us doing other things. So that's where it sits, our long-term memory. So what we believe to be sort of true from, let's say, from learned behavior, when it's been a long-term belief, that's where it sits, and that's why it's incredibly hard to change, because it's in that depth of 80% of our unconscious. Where imagination sort of sits, which is really interesting, because If you want to get some of these things, if you want to get better at sort of a lot of things, so you want to get more conscious about having a fulfilled life, using your imagination is a really good key of this. And sort of later on at night, when we're just about to go to sleep, is a really good time to imagine new stories. So what I would say at the end of the evening, don't put something on that's like a really heavy, like a violent film or something like that. Actually read and think about something that you would enjoy, or how you could perceive life to be better, or so that when you go into your dream state, your imagination can run a little bit more, and then you can change your sort of belief system by having a really good imagination. I think when you're sitting there, sort of being, when you go off into sort of dreamy world, some people sort of kind of quick to get you out of it for some reason. It's like, well, what are you doing? You've gone off dreaming. You're like, it's actually really good for you. It's like a bit of part of meditation. So I say it's where your imagination can sit. So don't be afraid of your imagination, and make it something that's it's happy, that's fun, that's getting in touch with your sort of like essential part of you. So yeah, intuition, your gut feeling, your nervous system. So yeah, it's really interesting in sort of like your unconscious. What we've got to do with the real you and your belief system, everything, is try as much as possible to make sure your belief system and your long-term memory is a healthy one, because that's something you're going to do, let's say subconsciously. So you're going to do habitually. So make sure your habits are something that serves you. And all those things will rewrite your narrative from a bad story into a good story, because it's your unconscious that's really going to drive you. Why we talk about sort of like meditation and mindfulness is where it's where your consciousness sort of sits. And I want you to do your life more consciously, so that you can actually start to the consciousness of being 10% could be 20%. It could be further. The people that really have a real awakening, their consciousness is so much higher, and their belief systems are so much better. So the two things start to be a one big good whole, rather than a separation of the two things. That short-term, long-term memory, I think, you can see it in sort of dementia sort of patients, can't you, where they can remember sort of things from sort of way back, but struggle from what's just happened sort of 2 minutes ago. It's where when you that short-term memory, when you go into a room, you kind of think, oh, flip, why can't I remember what I came in for? It's because you didn't get it into your conscious. You need to sort of like, if you want to go from what A to B to C to D, then you've got to kind of start off before you set out, is to start imagining where and what it is that you want to do. I've started to sort of use the meditation on and breathing on simply spending 10 minutes breathing what I want to remember. So I'll use a word or two words, and I'll breathe out that word and breathe in that word. And it's amazing. It's just having a massive effect on me, on being able to remember what I wanted to do today, by just starting off the day by making sure that I get conscious, so that what I'm thinking consciously goes into my unconscious, so I can get it quickly. I hope that makes sense. So your belief system, your critical thinking, your what we sort of conscious mind and unconscious mind. This is a massive sort of section, so I'm going to just wrap this up now, but I just want to wake you up. We're going to talk a little bit further down about, it's a diagram called Culturescape, and it's where we sit, where the culture is, and then outside of that is an awakening, and outside of that is another step. And When we get into our fourth place is where we find our joy, our flow, and we're much more aligned. So first and foremost, I've got to wake you up into knowing that you have two selves. You need to know, who are you listening to? Is that other voice serving you? Remember, it's 80% of your thinking. Remember, it talks to you 1,300 words a minute. So if you want to sort of get good at going to the gym, you need to start thinking about, how do I get that into my belief system that it's a good thing to do? So it becomes automatic, it becomes a habit, it becomes something I'm not fearful. So for me, like I say, this is local. So I joined the gym in the Deganway Quay, and what I had to do was to first off find a time that suited me and my thinking and my body. I tried quite a few different times until I got a time which fitted my working day. Um, I then, as I drove there, I got to the traffic lights. I know that the traffic lights there can be a bit awkward, let's say. So I now see them as being a release into something that I love doing. So I don't mind sitting at the traffic lights at all. I turn over there, and you're driving into where the boats and the marina are. I love boats. You've probably heard me mention this before, but I love boats and the sea. So I drive in there. I know that this is going to make me feel better, feel good. I'm not feeling threatened. I'm not, I've taken the fear out of it. It's easy to park. You can look to Conway Castle and stuff like that, and you're just like, you can be grateful. So I'm feeling gratitude. I get out the car, I walk through the doors open for me, I don't have to do anything. I walk into the reception area, there's the ceramic sort of floor tiles, they look nice, I think, and they feel sort of nice. In the winter, it's really nice and warm in there. I love the warmth. Even though I say to go to a cold shower, I'm not saying do cold all day. I go into there. There's towels provided for me. So if I go to another gym, I might have to take a towel and take it home. And it's wet and it becomes a bit of a pain. So the towel's there. The changing room's nice. Good showers. The gym equipment. It's okay. It's not the best, but I've decided to tell myself that it's good enough for what I need. It's usually fairly quiet, so I don't have to think about sort of like having to wait for pieces of equipment. When I'm doing an exercise, I make sure that I know that I want to be pushed a little bit. I know that's part of my psyche, so that I enjoy I make sure that I know that I enjoy that hassle, that pain a little bit. So I just make it a narrative and a story of something that's really good and healthy for me. And then at the end of that, sort of certainly before lockdown, when I was going a bit more, I started to lose a little bit of weight and change body shape a little bit. And people then started saying, oh, you've lost weight or you've done this. And then that was like a good affirmation, wasn't it? It's kind of like, well, that makes me feel good. So now going to the gym is even better, even easier. So what I'm saying, guys, is change your mindset. You've got to do it by small steps, small increments. We've got to change your belief system. I've got some books on here. We'll have some links on these, but Finding Your North Star, it's where the Social Self, Essential Self Questionnaire came from. A great book. There's another book called Seat of Your Soul. This sort of deals with, Tony Robbins talks about this as well, is that a lot of your decisions that you'll be making is because you've chosen one parent ahead of maybe the other. Most people gonna go like, I put my dad higher than my mum. I want their attention. I know it sounds a bit strange. You might be equal, but most sort of people sort of have one of them they hold in a higher esteem. They certainly sort of want to please that one parent more. And then your question is, well, what did you have to do to please them? So you think of those things about how did I make mum happy? How did I make dad happy? Whatever. And then also what you couldn't be. So, you couldn't be, let's say, noisy at a certain time, or, you had to be funny, to get their attention. So think of the things that you had to be and also the things that you couldn't do. That's the seat of the soul goes that. And then I say Tony Robbins does a great sort of talk about this. So go on to his stuff. And then if you're with the trauma sort of side of things, there's a book called Claim Your Power by Mastin Kit. Trauma is something that I'm not going to ignore because it's something that's massive. It's one of the biggest things that holds us back. But what I will say with trauma, I can only really do that with on a one-to-one sort of basis. Like I say, with trauma, I would certainly start off with trying to get some counselling and do some CBT, but in and around that, if you want some help with trauma, then I can do. But like I say, it's not something that I'm going to do with these talks because it's very, very personal. And also we need to talk around on that is forgiveness and unforgiveness. There's a great saying out there, sort of unforgiveness is like drinking poison, hoping the other person dies. So, but all you're actually really doing is poisoning yourself with that unforgiveness. I'm not saying we forget what people did, but we need to find forgiveness to set you free. So trauma and unforgiveness I can work with you for, but there is books out there. I will also share some links with a guy called Dr. Joe Dispenza. Amazing guy. Just dig into his world. Honestly, guys, it's so I'll just keep sharing you links, but all of this is now kind of like up to you. You can either choose to diss this, you can choose to ignore it. You can choose to hopefully maybe carry on or even come back to it in a month, 2 months' time. Something that you need to do is get repetitive. So if this doesn't work for you sort of straight away, find out why. I will, if you want to email me back your answers to your questionnaires, and let's get in touch and I can help you to understand why you've got never and rarely in there. Remember, there's going to be an interview on this as well. So yeah, it's all there, guys. The workbook's there. I'm here. There's YouTube. We're going to be doing more clips, and let's just try and build a community that really wants the best for each other and to see people grow into great things and really blossom. I'm passionate about it. I'll do my very best. It might not always be good enough. I'm not complete. I'm still working on my sort of the good and the bad in my life. So, it's a journey, and like I say, not a destination. But like I say, I'm not the same person I was 6-7 years ago. I'm not the same person I was probably 12 months ago. There's resources, so I'll leave that with you, and I'll speak to you soon in talk 3, which will be more about like your life purpose and how we find that. So that's kind of another exciting one, but you need to know talk 1, talk 2 before you go into talk 3. All right, you guys take care, love you lots, and be good.